Okay.
Some patriotic.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a song that the British played when they were like going to ship all the tea to Boston.
Oh, is that? That's
right? Was that the
what it's
shipping?
from.
They were like, that's what they played when they were like packing the boat.
Man, Boston's just always been a port town. Full of Irish punk bands.
Yep. Yes.
So
Hi,
yeah, welcome
Anna
to Question
Chelsea.
Block, Secret Loft's live podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm Wires of NYC. I also go by Alex.
Alexander.
Go by Alexander Neuhausen. And you are?
Arielist. I also go by Arielist.
You look kind of French with this look.
I do?
Which is, they were allies of the Americans in the Revolutionary War, so it's pretty fitting.
Oh shit. I'm gonna go broke helping them. And yeah, it's so
and then
funny
have
what
my own
happened.
revolution.
Yeah, it's so funny what happened with the French. Because they predicted it too. They were like, you think?
Well, then the Americans didn't help them out in return.
Well, yeah, because we were like fighting our own.
Yes.
We were like, we're fighting with each other now. Sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, as you've probably guessed, the theme of this week's episode is, I guess it's the American Revolution.
Yeah.
And kind of like the formation of American democracy.
Yeah, like July 4th, because July 4th is coming up, so like we're being cute about it. And last year, we couldn't be as cute about it because people were really, really mad at America, and they're like slightly less mad at America now, I think. So we can be a little cuter and campier about it. Last year, I think we just declared.
We just quietly observed.
No, we declared independence from
personal independence.
Yeah, from stuff that we didn't like.
Yeah,
and we.
it was sort of a resolutions.
It was a resolution revolution.
Yeah, but this year we'll talk about the history.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. Like I don't really like American history because I think it's like the most boring of the histories. But now I'm like, oh, it's funny because they were all so cunty. Like all the founding fathers were like so cunty, and they wrote like salaciously, and it's that's like I'll say some of the stuff they said to each other later.
They were super cunty, salacious, like argued a lot, and like if you think the current era of like hyper partisanship really sucks, right? Like Democrats, Republicans are like in totally different worlds. Knowing that it's like almost always been that way, that like there would be street brawls between Federalists and like Democratic Republicans in like the late 1700s. So yeah, I guess it's reaffirming in a way when you read the history of America. It's like it's always been just a big argument
and
among people. For
when you want to do
years.
something trashy, go to New Jersey. It's always been true.
A good takeaway.
When you want to punch someone, go to Boston, and when you want to like do the dirty, then you go to Jersey.
Or have a hardcore concert. Yeah. So I guess let's get into it. We'll talk about kind of the history, and then we'll take some guests or whatever, and if they have like tidbits of American history they want to dish on. They want to spill the tea on.
You're like very like founding father because like you're from Virginia.
I am, and I went to.
You went to Thomas Jefferson.
I went to
High
Mr.
School.
Jefferson's University.
Mr. Jefferson.
That's true. I went to Thomas Jefferson High School, and I went to UVA, which was the university Thomas Jefferson founded. Yeah.
Although I'm from New York, and that's where the original Washington, D.C. was.
It's really where the capital should have been. And it's where Alexander Hamilton was from.
Yes.
Well,
and Alan Burr,
he was
too.
from the Caribbean, but yeah, he and Burr were there. So I've seen Hamilton. It's
I
basically my
haven't.
primer on early American history. But you actually did a bunch of research.
Yeah.
But I was telling you, and the one reason I recommend Hamilton to everyone, even people who don't like musicals, is not because it's like rap or anything. It's because he does a really great job of making his characters complex. And so there's no real, like, Hamilton is the hero, but he's like makes mistakes and is like fallible throughout the thing. And Burr is not really the villain. He's also like a sympathetic character.
Yeah, because Hamilton like ran his mouth.
And
like,
the cuntiness is there too. There's a lot of like, yeah, they're in the form of freestyle battles, and also like Jefferson is a real asshole to Hamilton, like in the play, which is while still being like liking him sort of generally. They're on the same team, but like they're very cunty.
Well, let's talk about how I guess like going up to the Boston Tea Party
get into this
and stuff like that, which I love. Okay, we should clear up. So the two parties.
Yeah, there's the Federalists.
Okay.
Who want a strong central government.
And then
I believe they're the Democratic Republicans, they're called. And
That's so confusing. Just simplify.
Well, so the idea, right, they knew even when they drafted the Constitution and everything, it wasn't going to be a pure democracy. A lot of them were like, these were educated landowners, they're versed.
Pause.
I think you want to know where they got the name.
We're gonna get up to the Constitution and then you can go in depth, but just like so they were the Republicans of today.
Yeah.
Who are the
Well, the idea of the issues were totally different back then, right?
Right.
They didn't have a culture war or anything.
No, but like who's more similar to who?
I suppose a good take on it though is that the Federalists would be like today's Democrats.
Okay.
And they were mostly from the northern states.
Okay.
While the like I guess Democratic Republicans were mostly southern states. Back then the southern states were wealthier because they had slaves and were
enslaved people. Apparently you're not supposed to call them slaves.
Oh, I have heard that.
You're supposed to call them enslaved people. They're people too.
Okay. So they preferred a very decentralized government because one, they didn't want northern states to outlaw slavery,
right?
And two, they had a lot more money and were like financially on like better footing than the northern states.
So we're gonna get into like the nitty gritty in like a moment, but we're gonna talk about just like leading up to that, to when that like.
It's funny that today it's kind of
reversed.
Financially, it's reversed.
That's
right?
what I was getting at. I was like, just so that people don't get confused off the bat, like that there's that reversal. Mm-hmm. So what was it? After the Spanish-American War, Britain had helped America fight. Was it America?
What?
The colonies,
At the
right?
time, it was like the colonies, yeah.
Yeah. So, So after the Spanish-American, wait. I have.
But also the French and Indian.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. I think.
Okay, Spanish-American War, I think was
I think
1800s.
came after. Okay, so after the French Indian War, right?
Yes.
The Britons had helped the colonists fight, and they were in debt, and they were like, we need to like get some money, so we're gonna raise taxes, or we're like gonna change taxes, so to get some of this money back. The colonists were really mad because they didn't have a say in this at all. Like they were just like,
they did not have any representation in British Parliament.
No taxation without representation, bitch. That's what their vibe was, right?
Yeah.
And
so the first of these was the
with the
Stamp
Sugar Act.
The sugar?
Yeah, I told you I did my research. I may not have gone to college, but I did do research for the past day.
Tell me about the acts.
So there was the Sugar Act in 1764, and because the colonists were like, dude, we're just gonna smuggle shit, so it can't get like taxed, so that's fine. They're like, you tax whatever you want. But the Sugar Act prosecuted smugglers way more. Like the colonists, they wouldn't really prosecute smugglers because like they were smuggling. And then the Stamp Act in 1765, so like a full year later, they said that all printed material needed a stamp, so not just like letters, it was like playing cards, labels, like everything. Newspapers and legal documents, which it's like you don't want to like make those people mad because then they're gonna like talk shit and sue you, right? So because right, like they were like, oh yeah, your newspaper is like you need a stamp and that stamp costs money. Also like yeah, like printing, like all the people that you don't want to piss off that like need paper, need stuff that would be stamped. They got pissed because of this. And in October, the Stamp Act Congress decided, they like got together and they decided to boycott British goods, which is like the first, I think it was like the first time that like the colonists were like, okay, let's work together to like do something. And the Sons of Liberty, they monitored boycotting. So I guess if you were going to buy a British good, they would like knock it out of your hand and like smack you and be like,
yeah, you have to enforce
stab.
your, if you're going to do a boycott, people have to enforce it.
Yeah, I like the Sons of Liberty. Like that's so cool. Has there been like a punk band called?
I'm certain. The problem is now a bunch of it's been like adopted by like
I know. Yeah.
punk bands with like some with fascist tendencies, which is like very ironic.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
Sons of Liberty. I do like there are a bunch of New Jersey like punk bands that like still have that revolutionary like fervor.
And so the Stamp Act was repealed because like the Brits, like basically what would happen is like the Brits would be like, well, maybe, well, if we do this, and then they like do it, and the colonists would be like, don't do that, and then the Brits would be like, okay, like maybe not. So,
well, it's tough to enforce, right? Back then, it wasn't like super easy to like get troops across the Atlantic or anything. So like the British had like limited power to really like enforce things against the colonists, right? Whereas like you're not even really an occupying power, and like the British like the whole reason they're doing all this is because they need money.
Yeah,
they're like broke after a previous war, so like they like can't afford to like do a lot of like heavy policing of the colonies.
Yeah.
So King George is like trying to do this stuff, like trying to get some money. He's like, come on, help me out.
Like, yeah, and they're like, no. And then the Daughters of Liberty. Did you know there were Daughters of Liberty too?
Yes.
Do you know what they did?
Daughters of Liberty. Didn't they? No, what did they do?
What do you think they did?
Was Betsy Ross a Daughter of Liberty?
No, honestly, like
people
don't even know if Betsy Ross made the flag. Her her life was like very, very sad, and everyone died.
Oh, she's sort of an Emily Dickinson character.
Well, yeah, except she just like everybody just kept dying. Like she loved people, but they all died. And
okay, all right.
Yeah, the only receipt there's like her grandson or something is like, oh, I found receipts that people paid her for making flags, but she was an upholsterer, so they weren't sure if it was the flag or like flags in general. And then there was like this other dude who like also might have made the flag, but apparently she suggested a 5-pointed star instead of 6 points. That was like a thing.
Nice.
But we don't know if she like actually made the flag or like the flag. She did make flags, but we don't know if she made the flag.
We should also point out too, though, also like after the French-Indian War, the French gave up all of the territory east of the Mississippi.
Yeah, true.
So like America had just gotten like twice as big too.
It did, yes.
So again, the British were like, come on, like you got to pay up.
They were, but also they were like, we're gonna. Like they were like, yeah, you can't really like move into any of these colonies. Like they set up these like kind of weird rules about the colonies too, and it made it like the Americans were like, well, what good was your help if we're like not allowed to use the colonies the way we wanted?
Well, I don't know. They took over Louisiana, right, and like transit up the Mississippi. It was like a godsend for like.
Well, I guess the Americans were like, we wanted like use certain things for like trading or whatever, and the British were like, we're gonna monopolize that. So
like your fur pelts, we're taking those.
Oh yeah, the hats, the beaver like hats or whatever. That was a big thing, and the molasses.
Okay.
They wanted weird shit. The Daughters of Liberty, they were like the hipster Brooklyn girls. They were like, you guys should do like repurposing and like make your own clothes instead of buying like Zara and stuff like that and like fast fashion.
So one of the key exports of the British Empire at this time was textiles.
Yeah.
The British were like world leaders in like textile technology. And the Americas were mostly used, even at this time, in the late 1700s, for like raw goods. So America had a bunch of fledgling industries, particularly like shipbuilding around New York and like Boston. But like there was a lot of just like exporting like, raw timber or whatever, or like tobacco, right?
When we say timber, I just think of
the Kesha song.
No, that board game, Settlers of Catan.
It was very Settlers of Catan-ish.
Yeah.
Seedlers.
Timber. Seedlers of Catan. So Philadelphia and New York, they were really unhappy about the boycotting because it was going to ruin their import-export business. Right? There were some places that were like, we don't want to boycott, but we will, like the British goods. They were like, but we really hope the Brits like give in soon. And then in 1773, this shit has been going on for like 10 years. Yeah, since, right? There's the Tea Act. And actually, did you know the Tea Act actually lowered the cost of tea?
No, I thought the whole point was it was a new tax on tea.
It was a new tax, but it lowered. Here's the bomb that I'm gonna drop on you, okay?
Wow.
So it gave tax breaks to the East India Company, and it lowered the price of tea, so they were able to like offload these like sort of like the Liptons, like the cheap ass teas, to the colonists. But this was sort of like it was like tricking them, and the colonists were very offended by this because it was basically, they were like, if we accept this cheap ass tea, then we're saying yes to British taxation. You get what I'm saying? Like they were like, it's a slippery slope because if we're
the British like subsidized the tea, the cheap tea, I guess, but also then imposed a new tax on like the gourmet shit.
No, they were basically saying like it was the concept of
like if you want the Twinings though.
It was
high-end tea.
No, it was the concept of like they knew that the colonists would want to not boycott cheap tea because tea was like water for them, like they really fucking loved it. And so it was saying like, yeah, we can do whatever we want to the price of it. This week it's going to be low, but maybe next week we'll make it high. Make a high tea and a low tea. So the colonists were like, if we accept the cheap tax, then we're just accepting them taxing. It was basically to make them like stop boycotting their products.
Yeah.
So they were like, "Oh, you don't think that we see like what you're doing?"
It was like a teaser price.
It was a tea. It was a teaser. Yeah.
I see.
They're get you in on the ground level. So in December 16th, 1773, they're like, okay, there's a bunch of tea coming in.
Yes.
And we're
into Boston.
It got shipped to Boston. Yeah. A bunch of the Sons of Liberty, they decided to they put like soot on their faces and they were like, we're going to dress up like Native people, which is like cultural appropriation. Come on.
I know. Why did they thinly disguise themselves?
Because they didn't do a good job.
Yeah, because everybody knew what was going on. I don't really understand. And that kind of defeats the purpose. If it's like a protest movement on behalf of the colonists, why would you disguise yourself as a Mohawk, like Native American?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
For whatever reason.
Because they were stupid. I mean, they were dumb.
All right.
Yeah, so then they dumped about like $4 million worth of tea into the harbor.
Yeah, at the time it was... I read 10,000 pounds, but...
It was like the weight, though, not like the...
No. The L... Inflation, It's worth... That's a lot more these days.
I thought it was the weight.
Well, that's still a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so $4 million worth of tea.
Yeah.
It's like... I mean, that's a lot if it's like one person's tea, but like, I don't know, as far as like
one person
international shipping goes, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. That was the point. The colonists thought this would just sort of be like, fuck you. Like, think of King George's like their dad, and they're 18. The colonists are 18, and they're like, we want to be independent, but like you're our dad, so like you have to be nice to us.
Did I play you this song from Hamilton?
No.
'Cause they personify him as both very gay and like very like he is like a disappointed dad, and it's like the funniest part of the play.
Oh, well, see, I made this up in my own head. So
that's really funny.
Take that, Lin-Manuel.
Lin-Manuel, it's one of the funniest because he comes out and he's wearing like our cravats, but like
that's how I picture him.
He's wearing like 20 of them, and it's like bejeweled and resplendent.
Yeah,
and he sings this little song, and he's like, basically, he's like, come back to daddy.
Yeah, that's how I think of him.
Come back, don't fight me, I love you.
Well, that's how, so that's the colonists thought. They were like, he's our dad. Like, he's going to give us a little spanking, and then it'll be fine.
I'll play us out with it at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great song. Yeah, it's called You'll Be Back is the name of the song.
But he was like, I'm going to pass some intolerable acts.
He didn't feel they were intolerable, but he's like, it's time for some harsh discipline.
They were called the intolerable acts, though, by the colonists. But I think it would be funny if he was like, oh, I'm going to pass some acts that are going to be intolerable. They were such things like, especially for Massachusetts, because he was like, I have my eye on you. You really did me dirty. So he basically was the equivalent of him like taking their they didn't not their constitution, but like their Bill of Rights, and just like ripping it in half and like blowing his nose in it, even though that didn't really exist yet. So he took away like a lot of their rights to like in their courts and all this stuff. And there was like the Soldier Quarter Act, which when I heard about it, I was like, oh my God, I thought it was about being drawn and quartered, and I was like, oh my God, that's so like violent. But it was actually just like if there's a British soldier and he wanted to like have a sleepover party with you, you had to say yes.
Yeah.
Consent.
Still kind of bullshit. Yeah. Soldiers get to come stay in your house.
That's kind of hot though. I bet there were a ton of like porns about that.
Mm-hmm. Back then.
Yeah.
But you had to like buy the stamp if you wanted to publish it.
Yeah.
You could put it out.
Yeah, it was like a book. I forgot about that. It had to be a book. Mm-hmm. That's where they get you.
Yeah, so he starts also sending like more troops to like enforce these laws. There start being like
the Germans, not the Gretchen, what it's the something ins. That's like
nope. No, I don't.
The Hershins?
Yeah, I don't know. He starts sending more British troops, which is why there's like starts to be like an armed presence in like American cities at that point.
It's German mercenaries. It's not they're like
hussars.
No, they're like. Can I look it up real quick?
Okay. Oh, them.
It's like your dad being like, you messed up. I'm really disappointed in you. I'm going to hire someone from like a totally other country to come kill you. Like a mercenary. Like they were like, these people are out here for murder to you.
This doesn't sound right.
It's correct.
He started murdering Americans?
Well, he sent them to like be a presence, and they were like, if you mess up on these like intolerable acts, we're going to kill you.
Okay. All right. What are they called?
I will tell you in a moment when I double check my notes.
I'll wait for that.
So that's essentially.
Then what happened?
Well, that's essentially what started. The Hessians. See, the Hessians.
Okay. Auxiliaries to the British.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the Americans were like, that's really hurtful, and they were really sad about that.
All right. I'm glad we got that very important point across.
Well, they were big, important fighters in the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
They were.
So after the Tea Party.
Okay. So in 1774, I'm laughing because I wrote 12 colonies except for Georgia. So Georgia was scared, so they didn't show up to the First Continental Congress to discuss the intolerable acts. And then in 1775, on April 19th, Concord and Lexington, fighting began. That was like the bitch slap heard around the world, basically.
Well, there was like the Boston Massacre happened around then, right? Which is like kind of a riot broke out and British troops fired on Americans and killed 5 Americans.
Like civilians, though.
And so civilians, so they arrested the troops. The mob did beat the shit out of the troops.
Reminds me of, does it remind me?
And John Adams defended the troops. They had a civilian trial and the Americans were very much like, we're not going to just execute them or go crazy. We're going to show we're civilized. And John Adams successfully defended the British soldiers, and they were found innocent.
Oh, damn. John Adams.
The founding fathers were all lawyers. And I guess
they were
pretty good
right?
ones.
They literally all were and they all defended each other because they were only...
Yeah, not Jefferson, I suppose, or Franklin or Washington, but yeah, Hamilton, Burr, and Adams.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the Boston Massacre, which is around this time. And then you're talking about basically British troops started marching to seize the armory at Concord. And one of the things the Continental Congress in, I think, 74, 75 decided, the Continental Congress was like, let's start stockpiling weapons. And Patrick Henry gave his famous speech in 75.
Oh, what was that? I don't know about that.
So that was the give me liberty or give me death.
Oh, wow.
He's like,
who did he say it to?
So in the Continental Congress, he's like, we need to get ready. There's going to be a war. It's going to, this is going to happen. Stuff keeps escalating. And a lot of other people were like, no, tensions will simmer down. The British will come to their senses. It'll be okay. And Patrick Henry goes no, it's these intolerable acts. I don't know about everyone else.
Can't tolerate them anymore.
Give me liberty or give me death is when he gave that. It was either 74 or 75 at the Continental Congress. So he won over a lot of the Continental Congress representatives. So the different colonies basically started arming their own militias.
Yeah, but people weren't thinking about being an independent. They just were mad at their dad basically, and they
Well, he thought the colonists thought there was going to be a civil war, and that they thought there would be a war, but they would basically knock some sense into King George.
Yeah.
He would give them more freedom, and then they would go back to being British subjects.
Yeah, but then who did
Thomas Paine.
Thomas Paine did the thought that he was super thoughtful or whatever. What was it? What was the name of his book?
Common Sense.
Common Sense.
In January of 1776.
He throws so much shade in there too. He's like, ooh, King George is coming to arrest us. Yeah.
Plots.
You know what they say about common sense?
What?
It's not so common. Is that what's said in his book?
I've skimmed Common Sense, but I forget the details in it.
He insults Britain so much. It's so funny. I read he's
supposedly written very flippantly, and he wrote it as kind of
he threw shade.
It was a political commentary, but it was semi-satirical, and it was very out there.
He's reading them for filth, for utter filth, because he was like, how can a little shitty island govern a continent? He's like, that's ridiculous. Ha ha, LOL.
Yeah. So that it sold over 100,000 copies, which today would be millions and millions. So it was a bestseller. It was just a 100-page pamphlet, I think. And so it was a huge hit. Everybody read it. It was the hit series, right? It was hit
series. People were like, when's the sequel?
It was The Office.
Common Sense 2.
So yeah, everybody read it, and it re-centered the conversation. Suddenly everyone was like, he's right. Why the fuck? Why are we British subjects of this tiny island? There's we have way more land and wealth probably. So the concept of revolution and starting their own independent country, that kind of Yeah, he had the thought and then like shared it and was like, I was thinking the same thing.
It was common. Yeah. So then...
So yeah, that was January, and then later that year, the Continental Congress meets again.
Yes.
And
it's hot. It's summer. It's so hot. Everyone's sweating because they have like wigs. And they all like smell bad.
They're in Philadelphia, so it's still pretty hot there though. But yeah, they...
eating cheesesteaks.
Yeah, so Jefferson puts in like a real like long weekend, does some Adderall, and drafts the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, and the reason why they did it is because like you could be like, we're independent, but like they wanted to remember like once they were independent, right? They wanted to like be like, just in case we forget.
So this is a theme we'll come back to in the second half of the podcast now, is the colonists are very scared that they will revolt and then set up their own monarchy, and then like stuff will suck once again. And the Federalists are like, they themselves are worried about this, but not as concerned. But then like the southern states, the like Democratic Republicans are like especially worried about it. They're like, no, we like having our own little like Commonwealth where we can be like evil slavers and extract wealth from like all these people, so like leave us alone. But overall the Americans are very scared that like they're gonna grow up to be like their dad. So they try to put some ground rules in place so that they won't become that. But so they all vote for independence on July 2nd, but they're still like working out, spell
they're
checking.
Like, it's not ready yet.
They're still spell checking the Declaration. So they vote to ratify the Declaration on July 4th.
Yes, and who is it? Jefferson? I think it was Jefferson. Yeah. He was like, I think he was like, dude, it's definitely going to be. Oh no, it was, I think, or Adams.
Adams really wanted it to be the second.
The second, that's what it was,
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. And he wrote, he was like, on the second, it will be a day when like mothers will kiss their children and bombs will explode and, forever and ever, the second, mark my words. And then they're like, we'll do it the 4th.
But fireworks were his idea, right?
Yes. They were,
and a hot dog eating contest, I think, is also John Adams was really.
Oh, because it was in his. Yeah, he said They didn't call it fireworks though. They said illuminations. That's what they were, from one end of the continent to the other, forevermore.
Nice.
Yeah, the opposite of nevermore.
Illumination. All right. That's so funny that he like.
Yeah, but apparently, this is just how you celebrated everything all the time, was with with illuminations, because it was just like leftover gunpowder and stuff. And they had a lot of that was like cheap. And you told me something. Tell them.
Well, also, one other thing that occurred to me is candles were really expensive back then. So like they didn't have electric streetlights or any of that stuff, right? So like, if you did fireworks at night, like they looked really badass because your eyes were like adjusted to the dark.
Oh yeah.
So they like looked even. It's not like trying to be in New York City and you see like fireworks going off and you're like, okay, but Times Square. And then my other thought was, I think probably back then, because they like, if they're just shooting shells and stuff in the air, probably for like mortars and like for like ships firing at each other and stuff, they had a bunch of flares because it was how you would adjust your aim. If you were shooting at something in the distance, you had to see where the shot actually went.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
So that was my guess.
It's wild.
For why. But I mean, gunpowder has been around for a while.
But fire, that was just like the celebration for everything. So they did it like once with this like celebration, and then I think Rhode Island, they just kept doing it, and people were like, are we really gonna fucking do this like every year? Like, come on.
And Rhode Island is like, hell yeah.
They were like, woohoo, we're the smallest one. But we love to celebrate. I don't know. Yeah. They kept it going. Well, because that's the funny thing. Like, I'm assuming, because Americans are pretty dumb. Mm-hmm. Which I'm also assuming. I'm assuming that people think that July 4th is the end of the Revolutionary War, But it's actually just the beginning.
Yes, so very important to note, and I think a lot of people don't realize this. They're like, oh, we're celebrating when we became independent. It's like, no. This is just when we, like, had the idea.
Yeah.
Like, this is when we, like,
Which
wrote
I love that.
down.
That's so cute. That's, like, secreting it. It's like, fake it till you make it. That's so cool. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if you're like, I really want this job. I really want this job so bad. Let's, like, celebrate me getting this job, and you don't get that whatever job it is till, like, 10 years later, and you're like, I will celebrate when I had the idea that I wanted to become, like, a veterinarian.
Yeah, I don't want to get off track, but we realized the same thing about Juneteenth, right? We were like, Juneteenth was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, but it's because the Civil War was still going on for, like, 2 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, we celebrate when like we wrote down the idea. But the Revolutionary War lasted like 3 more years. It really had just begun then.
Yeah.
Oh, and we did miss the ride of Paul Revere and stuff.
Oh, yeah, which is a fallacy, which is it's totally fake, dude. Okay, it's totally like fake.
Wait, to set the scene though, this happened actually before Declaration of Independence signed 1776. Paul Revere was in 75. And there were these skirmishes leading up to it, right? The war had pretty much already begun. And so the British Army had gone to like seize the armory at Concord. Yeah,
the shot that I said the bitch slap earlier, but like the shot that was heard around the world. Because they didn't think, they were like, no one's gonna fire, like no. But then like someone did.
So,
and they were like,
Paul Revere supposedly, or a bunch of people warned a bunch of the militiamen that like the British were going to seize the armory and like take their guns, and so they were outnumbered. But it was like, I forget, in the battle it was like, I don't know, 100 some militiamen against like 400 British.
Minutemen. You know they were called Minutemen because they, you know why?
Because of Missy Elliott song.
Exactly. She don't want them though. She's into the Brits. It's because they had to be ready in a minute's notice. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like, what would you have to do to get ready, though? Like, to, like, fire or, like, get dressed? Is it, like, quick drag or, like, is it a mini challenge or a maxi?
You gotta suit up your horse and, like, get on it. And then you gotta, like... The guns sucked back then. So, right, you have, like, a bag of, like, little bullets and a big bag of gunpowder. And
you have to put
a bunch of like cleaning tools and stuff, and you have to like take the whole rifle apart.
It's like a reusable straw.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, but so the Paul Revere thing, it's like, so here's what happened, right? Like he was like, okay, I have to tell people, but one, he wouldn't have said the British are coming because like the colonists were like that would be like you being like the people are coming, like. Colonists were British.
They were British.
So, like, yeah, it would be like, we're coming. Like, he was, like, on the horse,
maybe
like,
he said, like,
we're coming.
He could have said the redcoats are coming.
He didn't, though, because he had to go, I forget what town he went through, but it was a town, I mean, everybody drank, but, like, it was the town of, like, super drinkers. So he got, like, shit wasted, and then he was arrested, and, like, he was like withheld or whatever, and he was like drunkenly screaming, and he was like, everyone's coming, and he just like caused enough noise and commotion that people were like, okay, something's going down, but they didn't. No. They like didn't know what. They didn't know, like, they were just like, oh, it would be the equivalent of him being like, fight, you know, or like when we hear drunken people, we're like, okay, should we check?
How did the Minutemen know where to go then?
They kind of like didn't. They just were like knew that they had to get ready.
Okay.
They were like, we have a minute for something. Okay. Yeah.
So they did like, they like ended up defending the armory. They like held off the British, and then I think that they were defeated. Like a smaller group of Minutemen like intercepted the British like column that was marching, and they lost, but like held their own a little bit. And then the Battle of Bunker Hill, basically the British... Wait, that was later. The British get to the armory, and like hundreds of militiamen Minutemen have like assembled. And the British are now like, by this time after fighting the earlier Americans, they're like running low on ammunition, and they had to retreat.
Oh, here's the other thing. They couldn't really like unleash on them because, again, it's like King George is still their dad, and he does still like, he's like, I gave birth to you out of my like pussy, and like I want you to come back to me. Like, I do want you to come back to me. So, like, if I actually, like, kill you really, really bad, you won't. So it's been, like, thought that the Brits, like, if they didn't care at all, like, they would have just, like, murdered a ton of people. But because, like, how are you going to win people back if you just, like, kill everyone, you know? So
it's very tough to fight an insurgent.
Yeah, army, to be right? Like, I just want to, like, mess you up a little. And then it's, like, very S&M. It's very, like, you know.
Yep. So then, we can do some, like, like, the war lasts another, like, 2.5 years. There's a bunch of battles. Washington famously is, like, the general of
why?
The Revolutionary Army.
Why?
Why did he get to be general?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, what was he? He had military background, I guess?
He was hot.
Okay.
They were like, we love you. No, he was, like, it sounded like he was super, like, modest. Like, he was like, I couldn't. And then all the people are like, do it. Like, do it. And he was like, okay, maybe I will.
Yeah.
Like,
famously lived in Mount Vernon. And, so he's a general of the Revolutionary Army. Does a pretty good job as a general, right? A lot of the early wars fought around New York, right?
Yeah.
And the end of it. A lot of it is actually fought much more northern than you think, right? The Civil War was fought in, like, Virginia all the way up to, like, Gettysburg and, like, kind of the East Coast around there. But, like, a lot of the Revolutionary War is, because it's the British just trying to put down this, like, rebellion. So they mostly just have to keep, like, trying to take over American cities. But it's, like, extremely hard to, like, get people to stop rebelling. Especially if you then, like, kill them and get them all mad.
So then it's really what wins the war is, like, thank you, French.
So it took the French secretly aided the Americans.
The French...
And they believe it's mostly thanks to Jefferson.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's the other thing, like, Jefferson and, like, I think Franklin they were just, like, over in France just, like, being bougie AF. But, and sometimes they were, like, scolded for that. Like, people were like, dude, you guys are having way too much fun over there. But then they did come through sometimes, and they were like, yeah, we have just been, like, drinking with these people, but now they're going to help us. And the thing is, when the French, like, openly helped. This was in the Marie Antoinette movie, because, like, Marie Antoinette was like, don't help them. And he was like, I'm going to help them. And she was like, fuck.
So starting in 77, the French
They openly did.
They signed a treaty whereby they would support the Americans.
Helped the French and did not help the Americans. Like, the Spanish were secret about it because they were like, we want Florida still. So, like, they were like, we don't want to get mixed up in this. But they were like, oh, we're going to support the French. So they were like, we do support the Americans. But when the French decided to help out, the British were like, oh, shit. Because now they have all these colonies, like, elsewhere. And, like, they have to now defend, like, it's become, like, a global war all of a sudden because it's, like, they have to defend India. They have all these, like, port cities that, like, France can get to. They're like, because the French has navy.
Keep in mind, 20 years earlier, the French had lost to the British in the French and Indian War. So they, like, were like, they wanted, like, revenge, kind of. And they're like, oh, you guys won that war for, like, all of this land in America, and now the people who live there are kicking you out. How funny is that?
Yeah.
So they were happy to, like, support the Americans.
But they were a little bit, like, freaked out because they were like, what if our people, like, sees what's happening and then they do the same to us? And then that's exactly legit what happened.
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, later on, America's, like, revolution did inspire a lot of revolutionary movements around the world.
Did you just eat a cupcake, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
It was birthday flavored?
That is a birthday flavored Hostess cupcake.
For America's birthday?
For America's birthday.
Happy birthday, America. Also, Medea, because it's going to be her birthday. And your dad.
And my dad's birthday is July 4th.
Yeah.
So, we can kind of... Like, a number of battles happened. They're like, probably the most interesting stand-up things that people know about are Washington crossing the Delaware.
On Christmas.
So this is, like, a bold move, basically. A lot of bold moves in history, by the way, of, like, battles or just when someone disregards chivalry and then wins, is usually seen as a brilliant move in retrospect. So Washington and his army were driven across the Delaware River. They had to flee New York because the British took over like New York. They like captured New York City.
Can you imagine how posh we would be if they
if they had killed on?
Yeah, we'd be like, hello.
So
it would be a different time.
Yeah, but so then on Christmas, Washington sneaks back across the Delaware with a bunch of troops. And takes over like the fort on the other side. And forces surrender of 9,000 British.
Because there were a lot of there were like a lot of those mercenaries, those Hessians. They were over there, and he was like, yeah, they're like gonna be drunk, and they're not gonna be like ready to fight. And everybody was like, dude, it's gonna be so cold, and like it's gonna suck, and it's Christmas also, and like we want to be drunk too. And he was like, no, but this is like our only chance. And I think Hamilton was like, I got your back, bro. And there's that like really like hot picture with everyone's sexy calves, and they all look not even like they're at like doing anything in the boat. They just look like they're all posing.
It's a painting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a picture.
It's not a picture.
I mean,
it's not a photograph. So it's an artist's rendering of the crossing. They didn't even look like they're working. Yeah, because a painter painted it that way. It's not their fault. I'm sure they were cold as shit and like hated it, but also at the time, this was I forget if this was like kind of winter of 76 or it's even 77, but the war wasn't going that well. And like before the French announced their support, so this must have been like winter after they signed the Declaration of Independence. Stuff kind of sucks. Like the British had basically just captured a bunch of cities and the Americans aren't doing well. So Washington crossing the Delaware and forcing like a major British surrender was a great like PR win. So,
it was a great PR.
Yeah, so suddenly like it gained a lot more popular support for the war, and everyone like had thought that the Americans were totally outclassed because the like British Empire at this time is one of like, they've just defeated the French. They're like the greatest fighting force on earth currently. And then Washington wins this major battle.
Yeah, it was the Battle of Yorktown. That's what won the war.
That's the end of the war. That's not crossing the Delaware.
No, it's not. But I was just like,
okay. So yeah, we fast forward 2 years. We might as well.
They did a ton of stuff at Ticonderoga, which I think is so funny because I'm like, yay, pencils.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Ticonderoga. Yeah, it was who.
But the Battle of Yorktown is the final like major land battle of it, and Hamilton.
Oh, Benedict
as we know,
That's right.
Hamilton plays a key role in the Battle of Yorktown because he leads like the expeditionary like lead force that captures the first British position. And Yorktown was also like it was like very strategic, like good generalship from Washington. So he wasn't just like in the right place at the right time. He was very smart too. And so the Americans actually like did sort of a pincher maneuver, and they managed to surround the British and like cut them off from their supplies
of pencils at Fort Ticonderoga and sharpeners. They were like, shit.
Yeah.
And there's Benedict Arnold, the traitor.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, yeah, he just was a traitor because like
he was the commander of the garrison where? At West Point.
Yeah.
He's commander of the garrison at the West Point, which, now military academy, and planned to surrender it to the British.
And then his wife was like, it'd be really hot. Like, I know a dude in the British Army would be like really hot if you like actually made a name for yourself and like was a traitor, was a total like traitor. And he was like, okay, so. Yeah,
What does his wife have to do with it?
Because, like...
Why are you besmirching? It's not her fault.
It's not her fault. It's not. She was, like... But, the letters... There's, like, very, like, sexy letters between them. Mm-hmm. And, like, in those letters, he's like, ooh, it's gonna be so hot when I, like, do all this stuff to you. But also when I, like, am a traitor. That's why I brought her up.
So the guy he was, like, corresponding with... was caught by the Americans and confessed and revealed the plot, and that guy was then hanged. And And so things did not look good for Benedict Arnold. So he escaped to like over to the British lines, and then had to like join the British forces.
Yeah.
So he didn't actually realize his dream of surrendering the.
But his name is known, and who knows the name of the other guy, right? So there you go.
But not in a positive way.
Wait, is the turncoat like good now? Was he a turncoat?
Yeah, that's never a good thing. It's like
it's a bad thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's betraying people.
I just imagine it as like a reveal on like a double runway or something where they had to do like their like fall and spring looks, and his coat just like flips inside out.
Yeah, that's not what. Okay, so the Americans win the war. They're now free. And then they're like, but now what?
But now what? So they have to draw
Suddenly
up the articles of...
It's like the final scene of The Graduate. And
with the window?
The
where he's like banging on the window and then...
That's the second to last scene.
Okay.
The last scene, they get away, they win, they escape from her family, and then they're on the bus together, and then they just look at each other for
they
like
make
30
out.
seconds. No, they just look like horrified.
Yeah.
All right, you might have walked out. Pivotal scene, redefines the whole film.
Damn.
So, Americans have to figure out what it means to be your own independent country that is a republic that does not have a monarch. And that's...
Yeah.
As I told you, I was like, that's the whole second half of Hamilton. And one reason I think it is like rightfully celebrated is it makes it really interesting, like this early American history, which is mostly a bunch of...
That's what we're doing too.
Yes, we are modern day Lin-Manuel Miranda. Is mostly a bunch of arguments about how to structure your government.
Yeah, but it's so funny, like, so should we, like, yeah, like, I guess should we talk about Hamilton and then, like, I guess, like, Jefferson and Adams, right?
Well, and Washington's a really fascinating character at this point, because Washington resigns his generalship, right?
Yeah, because he's like, I just want to chill, like...
He's like, I'm retired, I'm going to go back and just work my farm at Mount Vernon.
Yeah. With my teeth.
So which is why he's called the modern day, or the American Tacitus, or whatever, because Tacitus was a Roman general who gave up power.
Tacitus, wasn't it Tacitus?
T.
I think it's the C. Maybe it's a silent T. Yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way, his teeth
might have been the historian who wrote
his
about
teeth weren't wooden. They were not wooden. He had like a crazy dental life. Like he had tooth pain ever since he was born. Like even before he had teeth, he had tooth pain, and like he had so many dentists. Like, and he tried out like all the dental things that they had going on. Like yeah, like
Oh, Cincinnatus.
A Cincinnatus. I knew it was a C.
Yes,
Even though...
Cincinnati. Yeah, Cincinnatus was a Roman patrician who retired to an estate after being dictator. He gave up power willingly.
Teeth, this is really gross. His teeth, like... People think they were wooden, one of the sets of teeth, because one set was made of, like, ivory, and they think it, like, yellowed or whatever. And he would, like, prepare it, and it looked like he was whittling, but he was just, like... getting his dentures ready. But then his like best set of teeth, this is like really gross and terrible, they're like his enslaved people's teeth. Like he paid them a large amount of money to like, he's like, yo, give me one of your teeth, I'll give you like this much money, but I won't let you be free, but like you can come live in my mouth.
I'm surprised that even worked.
Yeah, they made dentures and they like screwed it into his like he legit like dentists were like his thing. That was like his plastic surgery. Like he was like, I'm going to a new guy,
Okay.
Yeah, I listened to this hour-long like podcast just about his teeth, so that was fun.
All right, I like the Cincinnatus fact better than that one.
Okay, that he retired, and then they forced him back for one last.
Well, they were like, you would make a good president of our new republic. Like, we need an executive branch, and you'll like head it, but like you'll have to defer to Congress, which back then had a lot more power. and like because you gave up power, we know that like as a general, like, and you didn't want to be the president, we're going to make you the president because then we know you won't become a monarch.
Yeah.
And so he's very worried about, and as we like researched, there was a like, he's like, so do I have audiences? Are people allowed to call on me? And they're like, you can't set meetings with other people, but they are allowed to set meetings with you.
Yeah, that would be my literal worst nightmare. Like, someone got hold of my GCal and they're just, your job does that to you sometimes, right?
And he was like, what do I wear? Like, do I get to wear, like, I have, like, really nice clothes because I'm, like, a wealthy landowner who lives at Mount Vernon. I have my own estate. And they're like, okay, not, like, your nicest clothes. Can you just pick, like, some boring, like, business casual clothes? And so he had just, like, a black suit that he would wear. So we heard the story about he was hosting a dinner party and some, like, official business had to happen. They sent, like, a messenger to his door. So he, like, went up to his room, changed into his president suit, came downstairs, took care of it, like signed the treaty or whatever, and then went back upstairs, changed back into his much nicer clothes, and then came back to the dinner party.
That's so funny. Yeah. They also, like, changing, they had so many, like, layers that must have taken forever. Yeah. I love if the person, like, actually came back. They were like, wait, I forgot something. And he's like, hang on one moment. He, like, has to go, he has to, like, change all over again.
Switch his wig.
Yeah. Yeah, he has, like, a presidential wig.
Yeah. Yeah, so then this was before, obviously, like, Washington, D.C. was established because that happened after Washington was president. But they did name a city after him while he was alive. And why is Washington, D.C. our nation's capital?
Oh, because it was, like, a deal that someone had to make with someone, right?
Yeah, so famously in Hamilton. This is actually during the Adams presidency, so it's after Washington.
Okay.
There's basically, like, once this happened, the whole, like, thing with the American Revolutionary War is because the British had all these debts after the French-Indian War. So, of course, the Americans win their own revolution, and now they have a lot of debts.
Right.
So, one of the like, I guess, things that Hamilton is remembered for, his legacy, is that he set up
the national debt.
A national currency, a national debt, and, like, a central bank.
Well, he was like, the national
or
debt.
Treasury, I guess.
He was like, national debt will, like, make us free. Like, he said some quotation, I forget what it is, but it's, like, really wild. Like, his like, notions that actually turned out to be true, but people were like, you're absolutely insane. Because he was like, we need to get in debt so that, like, we can have, like, a nation of commerce, basically. It's like getting it's literally, the way that I imagine it is it's like you need to get a credit card so that people know that you can pay back, like, your credit cards. So you have credit. You need to get a credit card so you can have credit. You need to get national debt so you have, like, credit as a nation, right? Is that, like,
Yeah, it's sort of that,
checkout?
But it's sort of like one, as, like, macroeconomics like to point out or whatever, is that, like, one person's spending is another person's income.
Yeah.
So, like, when the government runs a debt, generally, at least in, like, modern day America or whatever, the people who hold the debt are often Americans, right? The government issues bonds, which they agree to pay back at some point in the future. And maybe it's like other countries as well, but, like, a general whole, like, underlying idea of neoliberalism, which didn't even exist, like, 250 years ago, was that, like, if you create all these financial ties between people, like, well, you don't want to invade that country. They owe you lots of money. So you need to, like, let them remain so that they can, like, as they are, so that they can pay you back.
Yeah.
So that idea of, like, I mean, now is this whole global network of, like, commerce or whatever. But that was part of the idea. He's like, yeah, why not borrow money from, like, the citizens of America and then, like, owe it to them to finance, like, public projects? Like,
yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. You have some cupcake on your nose. Yeah.
But the southern states didn't want to go along with that. They didn't like the idea because they were not in debt, because they were still, like, making lots of money. Yeah,
they weren't they weren't into, like, money and stuff. They were into, like, self-sufficient, like, farm and, like,
which only worked in the context of, like, the system of
Enslaved
slavery.
people.
But yeah, they were not going to agree to it, to a central bank or a national debt, because why should they assume a debt that like they themselves like weren't actually in debt?
Yeah.
And so it was a compromise that was reached by Hamilton agreeing with like Washington's approval to put the new capital in Washington, D.C. So like the north part of Virginia or whatever, because then it was easier for Jefferson and Adams to get to work.
That's so funny.
Instead of, because at the time it was pretty much de facto like still in New York.
Yeah. So yeah, Hamilton had an affair. Well, no, I guess we should talk. Right, everyone knows he like is the only like immigrant of like
he's the only founding father who's an immigrant.
And he came from this very small, like, Creole island. He was this is what they said back then. They called the proper term back then was, like, bastard. So he was, like, a bastard child. Mm-hmm. He started working at this textile factory or, like industrial, like, factory. And he started managing it when he was, like, 14 years old. Because his mother had passed away, and I guess like his stand-in father had like taken all of their land or like their money and stuff like that. So he didn't have anything. He was a penniless 14-year-old, as most 14-year-olds are.
Yeah, he came a long way.
But it's actually like there's a conspiracy that the like head of that factory was his dad.
Oh.
Because people were like, dude, he looks a lot like that guy's like son, and the head of the factory like organized all these people to like raise money to send him to New York to go to school. So it's like a cute conspiracy. Probably not true, but whatever. Then he went to King's College, which is Columbia University. And he was really radical. He was also like 5'7", so he's like a shorter but like powerful guy.
Was that short for a colonist?
Yes. Yeah, because they were all like tall. I don't know.
Were they? I don't know.
That was short. He was often like noted as being like very small.
Oh, okay. I guess Washington was like tall, right?
Yeah. They were apparently, I've read something like they weren't smaller back then. We can get into it another time. Mm-hmm. That's another conspiracy.
No, they just had really high infant mortality rates.
And really, like, low doorways because it was expensive.
Yeah, if you made it into, like, your teens, you would, like, had a reasonable life expectancy.
And height.
And grew to normal height. Okay.
Yeah. They just made their doors, like, really small for no reason. They like to feel
And they
tall.
all had bad teeth.
Yeah. So he's, like, married. He's very radical. A lot of people don't like him because... But he's a great writer. Like, he's really great. He writes the Federalist Papers. Mm-hmm. And...
so the Federalist Papers were after the Revolutionary War. But, like, while they're still setting up the government, basically, and figuring out in the, like, basically the 1780s and 90s, they're figuring out, like, what the government is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Like, what America should be.
And he thinks it should be federal, and then he writes some papers about it.
Yeah, so he, wanted to argue for a strong, like, federal government.
Yeah.
And with more centralized powers, basically. So he wrote with, I believe, Adams, and I forget who else was the other author. But they, like, agreed to each write, like, a third of them, and then Hamilton
he wrote, like,
ended
50 of them.
Yeah, he wrote, like, 80% of them.
Yeah.
He's... And it's regarded as, like, one of the, like, greatest examples of, like, influential political writing.
Yeah. So he did that, but then, like, some lady came to his house, and she was like, my husband, like, left me, and I'm really poor. And he was like, okay, I can lend you some money. And, like, he did. And then she's like, how am I going to repay you? Like, as she, like, licks her hand. And he was like, well... Yeah,
And
so
while he was at home working still in New York, while his wife was summering like on vacation
yeah,
with
she
his
was in the
daughter
Hamptons
too.
and
Yeah.
whatnot. And he was also the national like treasurer. He was the national
He was
treasurer.
a treasurer under Washington. Yeah.
And so, he's like this money is coming out of his own pocket, but he's basically like, okay, so I'm gonna just start paying for this slut to come like blow me while my wife is in the Hamptons. And that lady's husband, surprise, surprise, comes back because he didn't actually leave her. They were like an extortion couple.
Yeah, and it turns out he's like, they're pretty sure he was like aware of it, and like he was like,
Yeah,
well, your
they
affair
were-
can continue.
They were
if
both
you just
aware.
Keep paying us.
They were both
Yeah.
in on it. It was a plan to
Yeah.
like extort him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was, and so it like the plot thickens because they're like, now you have to pay like the husband so that he won't tell because everyone's gonna think that you're using like the Washington's money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the husband writes like something, I don't know. There's like a whole thing, and Hamilton is like, he's like, I will die for like my country. Like he's just like super like, I love Washington. Like I would never like hurt his feelings or whatever. So he like, a bunch of the other founding fathers come to investigate, and he's like, no, I can prove to you, like I have the receipts. I don't know, like it's my own money. And they're like, okay, we won't. They're like, we'll keep this amongst us. Like we won't tell anyone. And he's like, I'm gonna tell everyone because I can't have people going around thinking that I would like steal from Washington. So he publishes like a tell-all
Washington from like
from America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the Treasury.
So
And like that it would like really hurt like the case of the Federalists and like Washington's legacy too, right? If this corruption. So he wrote his own
wait, what do you do?
expose.
Why you turn that light off?
Oh, I didn't mean to get that one. This disco light's killing me.
Oh. He's turning the lights out on me
There
because
you
he
go.
doesn't like me slandering
So
Hamilton's.
yeah, he revealed his own affair, and it was the nation's first political sex scandal.
Revealed by himself
Revealed by himself.
in the National Enquirer.
He outed himself.
And then his daughter, it drove his daughter, who the wife was like summering with, it drove her crazy because she was like, if we had been home, this wouldn't have happened. And she like went insane. His son died in a duel,
Yeah.
right? Like, so his
Supposedly-
life is in shambles.
As dramatized in Hamilton, it's because he's defending his father's honor.
It is,
actually.
it is. Yeah.
So like,
Because someone's like,
Yeah.
your dad's a bastard. And the son is like, I know, but like, don't call him that. It hurts my feelings. And then they, like, they have a duel and his son dies. And then his wife leaves him. And then people are like, you are trash. So yeah, he's pretty sad. And then, Alan Burr, Aaron Burr, sorry. He like is just like throwing shade at him like so hard, and Hamilton's like, okay, I challenge you to a duel. And usually duels could be avoided if you like apologized. If you wrote a letter, it's like so catty, it's so ridiculous. Like you wrote a letter that was like, I'm sorry for everything, then they could be avoided. And then even if they did happen, they wouldn't like really happen. So I don't know, but it was like a case of like no one backing down, I guess.
the soldiers, or the duelists would routinely like just fire in the air or not fire at each other, or it would even be agreed beforehand that they like weren't actually going to shoot each other, but they could then tell everyone they had dueled and that it had ended amicably, and like honor was like a very big thing. And I don't know if it had come out then or not. Yeah, one of the earlier novels called The Red and the Black is a French novel, but in it the main character is this pauper, but he becomes friends with this wealthy nobleman by challenging him to a duel.
Nice.
And they
I love
like
that.
He gets shot in the arm, and then the nobleman's like, "Oh, come with me. We'll patch that up." And then they're like good friends, and like, so maybe he read that book, The Red and the Black.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. So they have to go to New Jersey, to the woods of New Jersey, because like that's the original Vegas. Before Vegas, like what happens in Jersey stays in Jersey. Like dueling was illegal, but like whatever. So they had to go there, and we did talk about Dr. Hossack in our botany episode. Dr. Hossack was a friend and physician to both men, and he was both their second, I think. So you would have like a second who is like,
He's got to like clean your pistol and stuff and like make sure you're ready.
yeah, but also with the letter.
And if you get shot, you need somebody else there.
Yeah,
to, like,
you need an attending physician,
Yeah.
but he was like all of the things. He's like both their seconds and their attending physicians. I think the second, when you wrote the letter about the duel, like the second is like, and I'm second to that or whatever. So he was like, okay, one of my friends is going to die and I don't know which one. He was like very nervous about it. Apparently Burr like practiced shooting, and Hamilton did not practice, and he did not plan to shoot because he thought that this would make Burr look bad, and he thought he might give some of his like glory back. No one saw what happened because that way it wouldn't incriminate those people. So like they all had to wait by the shore, and then they went into the woods. They heard the 2 shots, and then Hamilton told Hossack, like, I'm gonna die. Like, this is a fatal. He's like, it's bad. And it was bad, and he did die. And if you go to 82 Jane Street in New York, there's a plaque for Hamilton there. Because he went to his friend's house. That they they came in the West River, Battery Park City or something, and they like went to Jane Street to like his friend's house, and that's where he died, and there's a plaque there for him. Yeah. So
yeah, but Hamilton at that point, I mean, he was already, like, this was now...
He was under 50, for sure.
This was the Adams administration at this point, though. So Washington is no longer president. Washington has given up power yet again.
Yeah, I couldn't not.
But we thought it was really funny that, like, the way they picked, right, when Adams is like becomes president, how did they pick the vice president?
It was just the person who had the next amount of votes.
Yeah, the person who lost got to be vice president, which we thought would be so funny if like Trump was vice president right now.
Yes, that would be hilarious.
Like, yeah. I think
like Nixon and...
At the time, they thought it would be a good idea. I mean, the vice president, like, has never had a very clearly defined, like, role. It varies, like, in every White House. But, yeah, it would be very funny.
Yeah.
But that continued for the first, like, several administrations, that, like, the vice president was always the loser of the election.
Okay, this is my ignorance. Does the president have any say in like who gets to be their vice president? Like who gets to run? Like if there's someone they hate, can they be like no?
Now, yes. In the modern...
Now, yeah.
Yeah.
Did they pick their vice president?
Biden picked Kamala Harris. Like,
okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, a lot of people wanted him to pick.
I thought
like,
we
Elizabeth
picked her
Warren
somehow.
No, you put together your own ticket.
Yeah. So what? So
generally, it's. I mean, nowadays it's like the party. Well, and throughout like the 20th century, the party decides was kind of the mantra of like the two political parties. So it's like after you would have like your primary. And a front runner would emerge, and that's generally what happens now. Someone's clearly going to win the primary. Or they do in the primary, and that person then announces their vice president, and then there's like the convention, which is now just a ceremonial thing where they like introduce the candidate.
Right. Okay. I yeah. It was so long ago.
So yeah, Biden announced that he was going to pick a woman of color to be like his like running mate. So everyone was like, it's probably going to be Kamala Harris.
They're like, unless one of these people gets a tan.
Yeah.
Or a sex change, which I mean that would have been awesome. The first trans
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah,
she's Hawaiian.
Yeah, it's one of your people. So Adams and Jefferson, like they're so funny because
You said they had their own rivalry.
They had their own really funny rivalry, and this is like all through the papers. Like they wouldn't just say it to each other; they would just like publish. They would publish like just like scathing remarks about each other, which is super funny. So Jefferson says that Adams is a hermaphrodite, like that he has like both male and female genitalia. Like I swear to, he has this like published in the newspaper, and then Adams like rebuttal to that is like, yeah, you should vote for me because Jefferson is actually dead. Which I think is so funny. Like,
that's wild.
Yeah, like that's the way worse like burn, because like, yeah, we could have had our first like hermaphrodite president way back when, our second president.
Well, Adams was the second president. And Adams was also, as we said before, Adams was a Federalist, like Washington and Hamilton. So the first two presidents got us on like at least a sound footing with the national debt and treasurer. But then it switched over to Jefferson.
Yeah.
The opposition party one, who is a Democratic Republican.
Well, that's why they didn't like each other. But Adams, I think Jefferson's daughter died, and then Adams' wife like wrote and was like, I'm so sorry, like, to hear about that. And Jefferson was like, I fucking hate you and your husband. And then they started writing to each other somehow, like, and they actually like became really good friends, and then they both decided to die on July 4th. So cute.
Well, and which daughter too? Yeah, right. Jefferson had a bunch of villagers.
Slaves. Yeah,
raping his slaves. Yeah,
his enslaved people. Well, that's the other
Sally
funny thing is that like everybody's like, okay, how is he like, you know, the land of the free or whatever, and he has like enslaved people, and it's like, yeah, he wasn't the man that he wanted to be. He was the man that he needed to be, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not really a good answer.
He had a lot of ideal. I mean, he said that he wanted a lot of things, but like he basically did the opposite of like all of those things, like in every area of his life. So yeah.
And we haven't talked much about Benjamin Franklin. Also, fascinating character.
You don't like him though, because everyone says that he invented stuff that you're like.
No, he's fine.
Oh.
I don't like Thomas Edison.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Real bone to pick with Thomas Edison. Ben Franklin, though, really did invent a bunch of stuff.
He did. He was lazy, too. Did you know that?
I know he was lazy.
He invented the thing that would, like, pick up... He invented the original, like, grabber.
Yeah.
Because
he did actually invent bifocals.
Yeah. Because he loved to look down at people.
He didn't invent anything, like, with electricity, but he did experiments with electricity.
Yep.
So the kite and the key, like... probably did more or less happen, something similar, where this fucking dumbass did fly a kite like during a lightning and thunderstorm. He didn't. I don't know that he discovered anything from it, but like, yeah, he got a perm. Like,
his hair definitely.
He was fascinated by it, and was like spoke like a number of languages, and was like instrumental in getting French support for America during the war.
Yeah.
But just kind of everybody, he was like older than a lot of the other founding fathers, I think. He was like a generation above them, but he was just their like weird uncle.
He's like a cool hippie. Like that's what I think. Like they're like, he's got stories, he'll smoke you up. Like he's got weird weed that he like, you know, they're like the Jefferson, remember from like Get Him to the Greek? Yeah. Wasn't that like what they, Jeffrey was what they called.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Come on. That's not a movie. Anyone needs to have watched.
It's about Tom.
Jefferson was, I guess, like sort of a hobbyist or whatever as well, right? Monticello has its like cool dome and stuff, and is like some classical architecture. He invented some kind of clock. A lot of they were all like kind of eccentric, right? Pretty smart. Pretty smart, eccentric guys, half of whom were lawyers and the other half of whom were slaveholders.
Yeah, and a lot of them were lawyers. And do you know that this another Hamilton like thing? Burr was actually the lawyer for Hamilton's divorce.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a yikes. He also was the lawyer for the divorce of the people that like conspired against. Because, like, they eventually got divorced. Because, like, if your marriage is built on, like...
Oh, that's funny.
An extortion. Yeah. Because there were only, like, 2 lawyers ever at this time. So, it was them.
Tons, but I don't know if it was historical or not. But Ian Hamilton, the musical, so it probably is historically accurate, that Hamilton asks Burr if he'll help him write the Federalist Papers.
Yeah, no, that was legit. Yeah.
Because he thinks Burr is a very good lawyer.
Yeah.
And Burr refuses because he doesn't want to take a stance. And so, probably based on original writings or whatever else, like, Burr did seem to be, like, very much, like, whichever way the wind blows, he kind of wanted to be, like, have access to power. But he didn't have, like, strong principles, whereas Hamilton was
did.
Obnoxious as hell, but did have very strong principles.
And Burr, like, really didn't like that, and so between, like, Jefferson and Burr, like, all, like, Hamilton was like, yeah, I just really hate Burr because it gets personal with him. Like, all the other people that were, like, against him, he's like, it's political, but, like, we've, like, kikied together alone, but, like, him and Burr, he's like, no, he's, like, personally, like, has a blood thirst for me.
Is why he was able to, like, cut a deal with Jefferson on, like, where to put the capital, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Should we wind it up?
Should we wind it up? Yeah.
I'm gonna play the King George song from Hamilton.
Okay. Oh yeah. Do we have any plugs? We have, like, comedy.
There's comedy this Friday. If you want to see live comedy about America, which is modern slice of life in America, that's this Friday at 8 p.m. at Secret Loft in person.
And then, yeah, let's see, our next, like, dance party situation
2.5 weeks from now
is with Vonov.
We will be hosting Secret Loft All-Stars Party.
Yes.
Where we'll have all of Secret Loft's greatest DJs and greatest aerialists will all be performing on one show.
Yes. And if you can check aerialist.org for all my dates if you want to see me do some aerial at the Slipper Room. I'm there, like, every week.
All right.
So come see ya, girl.
Yeah. So yeah, this song happens right after they draft.
Yeah, and give us a 5-star review. It happens
This song
right after.
happens right after they draft the Declaration of Independence. Then in the
Okay.
play, like, they're all like, yeah, and then Jonathan Groff, his name is, great actor, comes out.
Ooh, let's pose too.
Get my shades on.
Yeah.
You say the price of my love is not a price that you're willing to pay. You cry in your tea, which you heard in the sea.
Are we gonna get, like, flagged for this?
You say you cry in your tea that which you hurl in the sea when you see me go by.
Remember we made
Yeah. Are we gonna get, like, kicked off for this?
Maybe.
Okay, let's talk over it. Let's talk over it so that we don't get in trouble from our dad.
I don't need to hear it. We can end the stream.
Bye.
You'll be back, soon you'll see. You remember you belong to me.